So there are a lot of things in pop culture today that revolves around protecting your peace. And sometimes literally what it is giving someone a silent treatment or ghosting, even emotionally. But we don't talk about how painful that is. But we will today. Stay tuned. Guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah. How are you guys? How are you guys? We are moving through this year. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I don't know if you guys do this, but for me, the years are treated like mile markers. But I also realize too, the summer is always a very interesting season for me where there are actually a lot of changes happening, a lot of transitions, a lot of things that happen. It's almost like the summer mentally, emotionally, and energetically picks up for me. And I always say fall comes a little bit early because that's when I recognize that there are things that are falling away. There are certain areas of my life that are, blooming. Maybe there are other spaces that are dormant. But it's just like, going through the seasons. And I think it's great. It always gives me a very cool, sobering perspective on where life is, where I want it to go, what it's taken to actually get to this point. And I just love it. It's funny. Something that's been coming up in session for me actually with clients or just reading. I talk a lot about social dynamics and what I've noticed in relationships that has been like passed as something that's just cool, right? Something that's normal, something under the guise of self-care, when in actuality it when you really look at it, it's typically very selfish people or very self-centered, self-absorbed individuals that are using certain tactics to justify their lack of consideration for other people, right? And they call it protecting their peace. They call it having boundaries. They call it everything but what it is: selfishness, or inconsideration, or emotional immaturity, right? Or manipulation, right? Those are the real labels of the behaviors. However, no one wants to look like a bad person, right? And everybody in their mind has their own justifications and, moral made up. And sometimes, honestly, people know how they are moving through life. But to know what you're doing and to be called out on it are very different. Okay. I was talking to my client recently, and they were talking about the concept of, or just a process that they've experienced when it comes to, you know, their friendships, where it's like sometimes you just stop talking. There's no conversation as to why it happened, and that's just what it is, right? And when you see the person again, like, you are not allowed to really ask, hey, what happened, or did I miss something, or whatever, because now they get defensive. And then it's like, well, why are you expecting, or it seems like you're expecting more from me than what I am willing to give, right? And it's this emotional ghosting aspect of it, right? When we kind of, there are layers to this, right? There are times where, let's say, you are ghosting someone who hasn't gotten the hint, especially in like dating culture. I think, there's a difference between you being in communication with a person and you just check out, right? You just check out. And either you were initiating it or you were positioning it yourself as someone who is interested in this other individual, and then you just disappear. And they're left to wonder, wait, what happened? What did I say? What did I do? Yada, yada, yada. No real idea of what exactly took place. Just, hey, I am now not on a receptive end of somebody who was communicating pretty consistently. Now they just check out, right? Versus someone who is constantly, reaching out to you. You've never given them the impression that you wanted a deeper connection, right? And I myself, I've experienced this in the social media world. I talked about parasocial relationships a while ago. And, sometimes there is a certain level of entitlement that people have where they think because they have access to your platform or, in different ways have access to you by design, they think that they're entitled to have a deeper relationship with you and that their needs are supposed to be met by you. Okay. And for me, what I've noticed is that if I didn't give someone the impression that's what I wanted, I do not have to participate in what they desire from me. Like I don't. And that's me having a boundary and also creating that boundary from the beginning where they're like I know on my end, I did not create an environment where this person thought that it was something other than what it is. Okay. What people do, what they perceive, how they behave is literally their responsibility, right? Keeping your side of the street clean. And when a person is persistently doing certain things that may be uncomfortable or undesirable, but also to some degree disrespectful, you get to step away. You don't necessarily always have to acknowledge that or go back and forth, because sometimes that can be a ploy, to keep you in the mix, right? That's why the whole, people say, well, someone needs to just communicate. Telling somebody else what more work they need to do so you don't have to do any work and take onus of how you behave, it's also manipulation, right? It's like you want a person to work more, right? It doesn't mean that what they communicate to you, you comprehend it. And it also doesn't mean that you're going to take action to repair the relationship. It means none of that. You're just telling a person they need to communicate more so you can feel better. It's like, again, having work meetings and nothing ever gets done. You're just having a meeting and it's the simulation of doing work or being productive. But in reality, it's just, it's just biding time, right? So ghosting in that space or just taking a step away and not responding, that to me personally is a right. If I notice that there is a certain behavior that I am not looking to participate in, nor did I ever usher it in, I'm not participating in that, and nor do I have to, right? That's my boundary. Now, on the flip side of that is, let's say there is a defined relationship, right? A friend, romantic partnership, whatever, where there is a need for clarity, a need for communication, and the person just chooses to ghost. It's kind of different, right? It's kind of different, especially if the relationship in itself has not been one of chaos, discord, whatever, but the person chooses to ghost because they don't want to ghost or avoid, right? Because they don't want to acknowledge their behavior or, how hurtful their actions are or anything like that. So their response is to ghost. And it leaves the other person feeling voided, right? Because it's like, what exactly is going on? What happens next? Or what did I miss? And if they continue to reach out, whatever, it's like, oh, well, but what am I doing? It can be very confusing, and there are semantics that are played within that realm. But I think overall, if I have it right and I listen to people and I see how they talk about protecting their peace, it's like a lot of people, they need to speak loud enough so they could drown out the truth of how they operate. If somebody is like, well, I'm protecting my peace, this person's this, and this, is like, you know, from what it sounds like, this person was seeking clarity or communication or just a healthier connection with you. And this is how you decided to respond. But you go and tell the world one thing, but the truth of the matter is you didn't like the idea of being held accountable. You didn't want to address the fact that your behavioral patterns were inconsistent, but also to some point triggering. Okay. I've always told myself, or I've learned, if I have to have an uncomfortable conversation, instead of me just thinking about it like an uncomfortable conversation, I remind myself, do I respect this person in this relationship enough to bring up something that is affecting me? Right? And if I do care about that person, if I do respect them enough, then it is my responsibility to address a concern, right? That allows them to be aware, allows me to be the recipient of their perspective and their feedback. But also, that's me taking care of them because I am not harboring resentment, right? And that's what we need to understand. When we do care about people, we care about how our actions will impact them. So if you claim that you care about a person, or that person claims that they care about others, and their response to an uncomfortable conversation or dynamic, or just bringing up something that's hurtful, is to ghost, right? And to avoid the person until time passes or until the other individual just is, okay with it, then that doesn't really show that you care about them. That shows you care more about your own pride, your own ego, and your own reservations, right? Your own inability to essentially grow up, right? There is a lot that goes into being an adult. There's a lot that goes into being to having adult relationships, healthy ones. The truth of the matter is like conflict resolution, the ability to handle conflict, the ability to have a conversation about certain things, and the ability to have a willingness to repair, if that is your goal. But I think we've gotten away from the idea of responsibility, right? Responsibility. Because, there have been times in the past where somebody said to me, is like, yeah, I didn't hear from you, that hurt. And I'm like, oh, damn. Okay, cool. I'm aware of that now. I'll be better about that moving forward. Right? And it's a changed behavior. And hey, I apologize. Because if the person matters enough, then I want to make sure that I am approaching the situation in the relationship properly. But sometimes people fail to realize that their words may say one thing, but their behavior showcases a whole level of disregard and disrespect. But they still have the expectation that you handle them with kid gloves, right? Or they still have the expectation that everything is supposed to be cool. And it's like, but it's not. Especially if a person doesn't know whether or not they can trust you. And betrayal is a part of this, right? Betrayal is not just about backstabbing, guys. Betrayal looks like saying one thing and doing something else, and being unreliable, not being dependable. Whenever a person brings something up to you, you deflect, right? Or you become combative, or you attack them, right? Or you gaslight. Like, that is a form of betrayal, because now this person is understanding that, hey, I cannot trust you. I can't trust you when I need support. I cannot trust you to repair. I cannot trust you to be respectful. I cannot trust you to, own how you've moved, right? I can't trust you. So by design, these things, these cuts, are forms of betrayal, right? And even the silent treatment, that can be a tactic used to establish control. You address a concern with me, and my response to it is I give you the silent treatment. And then that person, depending on where they are in their own space and emotional regulation or even attachment style, how they will respond. How will they take that? For some people, it sends them into a frenzy, right? It unravels them in a very painful way. Other people may recognize, hey, if this is how you want to handle it, cool. I'm going to leave you to it. You know, but sometimes a person may use silent treatment as a way to control. If it's kind of like a conditioned learning, right? If you continue to bring up a thing that I don't want to deal with or talk about, I am going to remove myself. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to give you any explanation. I'm going to stonewall you, essentially. And I'll come back around when you stop talking about it, right? And then every time you bring up concern, I'm going to do the same thing again. So it's kind of punishment, right? It punishes you. So you learn eventually to not talk about how you feel. You learn not to address concerns. You learn to be okay with things. And what that does is it teaches a few things. One, resentment may develop, but two, you may feel that your problems or your feelings don't matter, and you cater to this other individual, right? Because you don't want them to leave, right? Fear of abandonment, if you will. It's not that relationships are hard. That's not it. We have a hard time having hard conversations because, who the hell wants to do that? They're uncomfortable. However, having a hard conversation isn't just about one person, it's about both. When we don't address our concerns or tell people how we feel, for better or for worse, we are stealing their ability to grow. We are withholding. Okay. And when we do ghost people or we do give people the silent treatment, we are not entitled to a welcoming space when we decide to come back around. We're not entitled to that, especially if there's been no change in our behavior. A lot of times people think that the passing of time is an apology, but you have to understand that if you hurt a person deep enough, when you come back around, they're going to remember the last interaction that you guys had. And if the last interaction that you guys had was left in ambiguity or, a void because someone decided to check out and not give any reasoning or any communication, that's kind of how they remember it, especially if it's a significant connection, especially if that is the connection. So I think I read somewhere they were saying ghosting or giving someone a silent treatment is a form of emotional abuse because it's painful. It is painful. Right? We hear it a lot in dating culture. Oh my Lord. We hear it all the time. But we don't talk about it in our other relationships. But it's the same thing, right? Because it's the same people, it's the same behavior. It's really something to consider when it comes to how we navigate with other people. Self-care, if you truly are caring for yourself, it won't require you to be careless with other people. That's true self-care. All right. And people can kind of try to straddle the fence or find the loopholes in it. But if you keep it simple, you won't have to do all of that. If you're truly being intentional, you don't have to do all of that. Okay. There's a difference between being disrespectful to people just because versus kind of checking a person when they're being disrespectful to you or they're treating you poorly or you have to address certain things. There's a big difference. Right. And the more intentional you are with yourself by design, you are going to be intentional with other people. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. But it's so interesting when I do listen to people talk sometimes and they are referencing, being ghosted by a friend, especially. And he's like, well, it just feels like you're not supposed to talk about it. That's just how it is. People grow apart. oh yeah, well, they'll come back around or whatever. And it's like, when they come back around, you should be ready. And it's like, that's not how that works. Hate to break it to you. You don't get to put people on pause. You don't get to treat people poorly and expect the best treatment from them later. It's not how it works. That's not how it works. And it won't work for people who are looking to have intentional relationships. I can promise you that. Because now they recognize what you're capable of. So the whole silent treatment, the ghosting, all that, it might be under the guise of protecting your peace, but I will tell you, you could avoid people all you want, but you have to take a look at yourself at the end of the day, every single time. You have to be able to take a look at yourself. And sometimes people may not be ready to do that, and it will show, because the people who they have to face, they are avoiding, right? Sometimes the people we do harm, they hold up a mirror to our truth. So we go elsewhere. We find other people. So just be mindful, you know, and own how you feel if you're in a receptive end of that. But if it does feel painful to you, allow that to make you more cognizant of how you may be navigating when it comes to other people. If it comes down to having a hard conversation, you are hesitant about it, or you are trying to avoid it, remember, do I respect this other person enough? Do I value this relationship enough to have a conversation and try to sustain the relationship? Okay. Even if there's no potential or desire to have the relationship moving forward, am I willing to have a conversation? Okay. If they are seeking it, sometimes there may be, as adults, we know how we move, right? Sometimes people may be unaware. Okay. And sometimes we may have a certain idea in our heads about what's happening and what we've experienced that other person may not be aware of. But I don't think it happens as often as people preach about. I'll put that out there. Because as adults, we've developed patterns, we develop behavioral systems, we know how to get through life. So by design, we know how we may be treated in person, but also we are aware of the other individual and how they move and how they function. So it's not a big mystery in terms of how we've been treating them or what's been going on, but when a transgression does happen, always think of it. Do I have a deeper relationship with my pride and ego than the relationship I care to have with this individual? And be honest, because it will show. Okay. And you can address concerns with other people if they are not looking to repair or be accountable or at least just move through it, then that's fine too. You don't have to keep trying with people who are not trying at all. You don't have to do that either. Okay, so if you have a conversation, you've addressed a concern, and someone is demanding that you continue to talk to them, you don't have to do that, because that's requiring more work on your end. But if you do address a concern and a person's response to it is the silent treatment, stonewalling, or they just ghost you, right? They quiet quit and they do all that. You get to take onus of how you want to move forward and understand that, yeah, even though it's appropriated in society, it doesn't mean that it's right. We all want to feel like we matter, okay? And no one likes being treated that way. That's just something to remember, okay? New merch is going to be dropping soon, y'all. New merch is going to be dropping soon. And I got a lot of love about the coloring book. I really appreciate that you guys enjoyed it. Shout out to the people who showed up to my speaking event. Yeah, I really appreciate how respectful you guys were, how kind some of you were. Just how intentional, and the fact that you just showed up really reminds me that, hey, when you are doing what you were supposed to do, you will create room for other people to do the same. All right. That's all I got for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy yourselves. Hope you take care of yourselves. And I hope you just think about this in terms of like what ghosting actually looks and feels like, because it is a painful experience, right? We don't get to experience ourselves to the magnitude that other people experience us. So sometimes we may be comfortable doing certain things that we may be uncomfortable receiving. All right. So take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take flight.